You're listening to Swipe East, Swipe West, where we dive into the dating differences from coast to coast. I'm your host, Ashley Davis. Hello, and welcome back to Swipe East, Swipe West, the dating and culture podcast focusing on differences from coast to coast. I'm your host, Ashley, and you can find us on Instagram at Swipe East, Swipe West, and you can follow me on TikTok at Ashley Angora. That's Ashley, Angora. Welcome back, everyone. I am so sorry in the delay in posting this episode. I am a little bit behind. Sometimes life gets crazy. As all of you that follow me know, I still work my corporate 9 to 5. I have this podcast, and I've also been learning how to DJ and have been booking gigs. So probably bit off a little bit more than I can chew, but that is a character flaw that I am working on. I'm going to be getting back on track with episodes in the following week. So thank you for bearing with me here. But with that, I do have some life updates. Part of why I'm probably also behind is because I've actually been trying to date. I think previously when I've been doing these, I've not really been dating. However, the dating has not been going very well. So I think the last time we left off, I had gone on a couple dates that actually had gone well. I had a couple guys bail, which is what I'm actually normally used to. And I've had some more of that happening as of late. So the latest update that I have for you is I was talking to a guy. I also stupidly went back on the apps. I don't know why I do this to myself because I always get annoyed with them. As you guys probably know if you've been following along the podcast over the seasons, I'm like a chronic download deleter. I don't know why. I just need to delete it forever. My friends get mad at me because I delete and download every other day. But I was talking to a guy. I was pretty excited about him. We made plans, and he is not from the States. So he was living in a camper. I don't really care about that kind of stuff. Again, if you've been following along, you know that money and all that stuff are not things that I really care about. They're not the top of my list in my dating criteria. So I tried to make it as easy as possible for this guy. I was I can come to you. I was trying to plan. I planned most of the date, but I understood that he wasn't from here, so it was fine. We made plans. We picked a night. Work's been crazy, so I worked late to make sure I could leave on time so that I could meet this guy. And he ended up saying he had no issue coming to me, whatever. We picked the time and everything. He confirmed the morning of, and then an hour before we were supposed to meet, I was literally 5 minutes from hopping in the shower to get ready. He sends me a novel about why he had to bail. And he was I just can't drive that far and all this stuff, even though, again, I offered to come to him. I had already been working late to meet up with this guy. And then it just ended up in all this back and forth because I just I'm going to call people out now. I'm too old for this crap. And he had confirmed earlier that day. So long story short, he asked to do a weekend. My weekends are booked until mid-March. So I just am not going to see this guy. That's that. There's another guy that I've been talking to that I met in the wild months ago, 3 months ago. And we've been trying to meet up since, but it was just one of those things where I'm not free. He wasn't free. I'm out of town. He has stuff going on. And in this situation, I've been kind of the asshole, not on purpose, just because I feel a lot of guys in LA are really last minute. Even when I've been on the apps or meeting people, they'll always text me to do something that night, the next day. And I've, I was saying before, I just have a lot going on. So I need 2 days in advance, 3 days notice to hang out with someone, unless I happen to free up that night. And when I do happen to free up, I normally prioritize my friends, not some random person I don't know. So I just feel it's always hard to schedule dates because, again, 9 times out of 10, these LA guys want to do things super last minute. So a lot of times I schedule my whole week based around the work that I have to do, either with my corporate job or with these side projects that I'm working on. So things just like end up not working out. Or by the time like I'll try to schedule something in advance, like a lot of these guys are like not good texters. So I won't hear from them. I'll start planning my own thing. And then by the time I hear back from them, I've been like lazy or scheduled my day. And then things don't work out. And I end up sending like my own paragraph about why I can't hang out with them. And it comes off like an excuse. I don't mean it to be. It's just I have a lot going on. So anyways, that was also very excusey of me, what I just said. So this guy and I still have not hung out. I don't even know if we are, because it's like, I feel like that's what LA dating is. It's either your schedules don't align or like there's something. But I feel like the universe is telling me like not to date because just nothing seems to be working out. And the guys that I am picking and meeting up with, like, we're just not aligning. So I feel like it's telling me to just focus on work. All these like TikTok astrology people keep telling me that too. So I'm just seeing what's going on. But I'm actually recording this the night before I'm leaving to go back to Philly for work. I went to San Clemente this weekend. This time of year, I always get super depressed. I was talking to some people about it. I feel like it's because, I don't know, like someone was saying it's because it's like that weird lull period in between the holidays and like the summer. I don't normally take vacations in the winter. I also don't go home for the holidays. So maybe it's because you get kind of antsy. So I went to San Clemente just to like clear my head. I was super hungover. So that was probably a bad idea, but I think it was helpful, and probably going out of town, even if it is for work for a couple days, will be good. And then I literally get back, play a DJ set, and go to a music festival. So I feel like the craziness of my travel schedule is already beginning. But that was a lot, probably because I also haven't talked to you guys in a few weeks. But I've rambled on for 7 minutes now, so time to get into this week's episode. I'm really excited. This week, we're talking about San Francisco. I've been wanting to do an episode on this city for a long time. San Francisco has never really been my favorite city. I think it's a cool spot. I've been there quite a few times, sometimes for work travel, sometimes for personal. I went there my first time when I was younger with my dad on a business trip. So I've been a lot of times in many different stages of my life, multiple different reasons. And I'll talk about my feelings about it and why in this episode, hoping to plan a trip this spring and kind of get maybe a new perspective on it, since apparently things have changed since COVID, which we'll talk a bit about as well. But I'm also excited this episode because this week I have a man and a woman on. My friend Maddie, who I actually met through some mutual friends a couple years back now, and then her friend Jack, that she also knows in San Francisco. They are not dating, just to clarify, they are just friends. But it was really interesting to get two different perspectives from two different genders on this episode. Maddie works in tech, so she is a woman in tech, whereas I think a lot of the stereotype or things you hear about are men in tech. So it's interesting to get her perspective. And Jack actually does not work in tech. He is tech adjacent. So it's kind of a bit of a role reversal from what you typically think about San Francisco. But I'll let the rest unfold through the conversation. You might hear me give Jack a little bit of a hard time. Sorry, Jack, if you are listening to this, just because I think he's actually a nice guy, and I think he gives a lot of perspective on of things that a lot of women talk about, with why guys, might wait a few dates to give an opinion or break things off with someone, or maybe not, or why they approach things in a certain way. And the reason I poked at him a bit is because I think there's a lot of information that goes around, especially on like TikTok and things like that, about men specifically and why they might do certain things with women or wait a few dates before having that type of conversation. I think he sheds some good light on that people might not be thinking about. So with that, let's dive into the episode this week. I am so excited to have my two guests this week, Jack and Maddie, especially because I have never had a man and a woman both on the show at the same time. So I'm super stoked to hear about both their perspectives on San Francisco. So Maddie, I want to start with you just because I've known you the longest, so tenure here. What are your thoughts on San Francisco? I know you're not from the city, so like what brought you there? Give us the lay of the land from your perspective.
Yeah, so I moved to San Francisco, let's see, almost 5 years ago. Moved primarily for work. I am a tech bra. And yeah, I would say dating for me has been interesting in San Francisco. It's been like kind of in spurts where I feel like I've dated people for like a couple months at a time, nothing serious, nothing long term. And it's interesting in contrast because I moved from the Midwest, which I feel like basically if you go on 3 dates with someone, all of a sudden you're like married to them. It's just like very, very different. But yeah, I would say, I mean, obviously, like from a demographic standpoint, San Francisco is interesting to date in as a woman because there are just more men. At least that's touted. I don't know if that's actually what comes out in the numbers. But yeah, it's definitely been an interesting ride, specifically being a woman in tech as well.
All right. And Jack, what do you think of the city? I think you're from the Midwest as well.
Yeah, I guess Maddie, I didn't realize we moved here around the same time. So, Maddie and I know each other really well and run in the same social circle. But I moved here 5 years ago as well from Minnesota. And I've been.
Go first.
No, we're on Wisconsin. we're Badgers, baby. But yeah, just a little college rivalry there. But I've been, I guess, similar to you, Maddie, too. I haven't had anything super serious during that time. It's been a mix of like looking intently and then casually dating. But overall, it's been pretty consistent and just like being on the apps and putting myself out there and trying to meet new people. I agree with Maddie that it tends to be like we tend to emphasize the tech bros and just how men tend to outnumber women. But I would say maybe I'm an outlier here, but I've found it to be a really fantastic city to date in. I know it's like kind of a popular thing, like, oh, every city that you live in tends to suck for XYZ reasons, but there's such a variety of people from all backgrounds and just honestly an abundance of like incredibly smart, interesting, and attractive women here. And I think it's a really great city to date in as a guy. And honestly, like if you're just a normal dude, I think that gets you really, really far. I said, yeah, Maddie's shaking her head a little bit. Like it just gets you so much further. Like if you're able to hold a conversation, if you ask people questions, so that's kind of my long answer of kind of the lay of the land and what I've experienced here. And I don't have any maybe of the same flags or triggers that someone who's like dating tech bros might have.
You just described doing the bare minimum, Jack. So like holding a conversation, asking questions. So I'm glad you know that. Like that's great.
The bar is low for men here.
Yeah, I inch over it. It's ridiculous based on what I've heard from Maddie and other friends in the city of just, I don't want to kind of bash the legion of tech bros and just the overall male population here, but just based on what I've heard, it tends to be, what is that? Odds are good, but the goods are odd type thing.
I was trying not to say that.
I had that in my head the whole time. So I want to dive deeper into kind of what you both said. So obviously, yes, there's definitely a lot of tech. I know, Maddie, you work in tech. Jack, you're not exactly in tech specifically, but tell me a little bit more like about the city itself. Like, what is the city like? I know, Jack, you were saying there's a bunch of different types of people, even like outside of tech. So like, how do you feel the city is overall, even like outside of dating? Like, what's it like going out, like meeting people? Like, how's your experience been there? I mean, you've both been there a while, so you must like it enough that you're still there.
So the other interesting thing just in living here for 5 years is a lot of that was, not a lot of it, I guess not the majority, but COVID in San Francisco, I think was different from a lot of cities. And the reason I mention that is going out here up until maybe the beginning of this year was just like it never came back. Like now it's back, but it took almost 2 full years to kind of come back to where it was pre-COVID. And so I didn't start going out again until like February of 2022 because I don't know, it was just a matter of time before like stuff would get like shut down again and you just didn't know when that was going to happen. I also think like I was also like very afraid of COVID for a long time. I was one of the last people to kind of like get COVID. So I think it just hit differently here. I also think there's this reputation that San Francisco is like a very like early night city. Like you go out and then you like go to bed early so you can get up in the morning, like go hiking, go mountain biking, whatever you do. I think that was true pre-COVID. I will say my experience more recently has been just like going out a lot later, as you both kind of know. So that's been like one interesting just change, I will say. Is like it's actually a pretty good nighttime city and there's like a pretty good, I don't know, underground or like after party scene if you're a part of that, which I guess I more recently have been. I would say because of the tech scene, people are not like don't really like maybe mingle as much. Again, that's kind of changed in the neighborhood by neighborhood. I think there's some differences too. I think if you go out in neighborhoods where there's like high concentration of tech people or like, I don't know, just like maybe like sleepier, like there's just a lot of variation by neighborhood. Like some of them are, my prior neighborhood was very like almost like family centric. So there weren't a lot of bars. It was like more you'd go to dinner and maybe you'd do drinks after, but there wasn't like people stay out until, bar close. The neighborhood that I'm in now is like a very young person neighborhood. I also think there's an interesting mix of like tech, non-tech. So people tend to go out and go like a little bit crazy or like socialize more at the bar. It's not like everyone keeps themselves. It's like people do mingle a bit more. Whereas before in my previous neighborhood, I don't happen as much.
I was never a huge fan of San Francisco because of the nightlife scene. This was also pre-COVID. Like as like Maddie knows, like Jack, I know we're just meeting. Like I like to go out late and stay up late. And I remember I was celebrating my friend's engagement and we got to the bar at like 11 and within the hour it was like last call. And we found one bar open past like 12:30 and they were only serving shots. And I was like, what is this? Like, what is this place? So that's interesting that it varies by neighborhood and how the tech scene can affect that, though, and that it's changed even since COVID. Jack, what's your experience?
I would agree that definitely it's not a city for night owls for the most part. Like that's not me. So maybe there are, like Maddie was saying, the underground scene that I myself, I'm not as interested in that. No judgment there. It's just not like my 2 a.m., 3 a.m. days, probably a little bit behind me. But I would agree that it's not a late going out city. I'm probably more pissed about the fact that there's like no food open past midnight other than, the beloved hot dog stands that post up outside of some late night bars. But outside of that, it's really slim pickings unless you want to spend $30 on DoorDash for some shitty pizza or something. So that's probably a bigger bone to pick for me than the lack of like 4 a.m. bars. And then I think like along those lines too, it's not really a dress up type city as if you're going out to a LA, New York, or even Chicago club. It's definitely more like you'll go to a neighborhood and maybe bar hop at 2 or 3 places, and probably call it a night after that, or maybe mix and mingle across different neighborhoods or whatnot. But it's more of a casual vibe than something where you're like trying to dress to the nines and maybe see a celebrity out or something. That's definitely what I've experienced more often than not.
Dressing to the nines is like getting a jacket and hiking boots, right?
Oh yeah, and maybe you'd get your AirPods in, and you'd have your Allbirds on, and that's a
machine washable. So I get it. Yeah.
You need the branding, though. I guess that's really what stands out, right?
Oh yeah, what company do you work for? So you got to have, whether you're at a hot new startup or a big tech company, you got to let people know that you make money.
Do people care about that? Like, is that like a turn on or a turn off? Or both, depending on the person?
The way that I approach it is I appreciate stable employment. So that's always a win. But it very much comes down to how the person carries themselves. Like, it can go a couple of different ways from there. Is it like, are they very conceited and thinking like, oh, I work for Twitter? Well, not anymore, but like the way maybe the brand used to be, or like a Salesforce or Google or whatever. And you carry yourself in a way that you think you're better than people because you work for that company. That's a real turnoff. Another turnoff would be is if you think that, outside of if you're actually saving lives or changing the world, like if you think this is the most important cutting edge thing that everyone needs to know about and you make that kind of your identity, that's a turnoff. Like maybe for Maddie running into guys who like talk about Bitcoin and all of that shit, that would be like a nightmare to be on the inverse side of that for someone who just the only way they see themselves is through the lens of their job. So those two aspects are turnoffs to me. But again, I think like if it's a signal that, maybe they're smart, responsible, and they pay their bills. And I think in that sense, yeah, and they have maybe a career trajectory, and especially now when you typically need two incomes to even, sniff at affording like a 2-bedroom in the city, that's appealing for sure. So it kind of cuts both ways. It just kind of depends on how a person carries themselves.
And this is men and women that both like, because I feel like in my head, I always imagine like a man that would do that, but it's women also that are like doing this.
I've run into it a few times. I wouldn't say it's as prevalent. I mean, I can't speak for the other side, but just based on instinct and a little bit of what I've heard, I would say that it definitely tends to be less of a thing where women wouldn't necessarily be like, oh, I work at Apple on a first date or something. Let me tell you about this code that I just wrote, where I feel like Maddie might be like, as a guy, you might be more predisposed to wanting to impress someone through status or money or job, whatever, like on a first date. I feel like I've heard that a lot more than me personally experiencing that on the other side.
Yeah, I think there's some, like, coming from my side, there's a couple of things. So, like, sometimes I think I've used that, like, almost status as a benchmark for intelligence. And Jack, you mentioned, I just think, like, in general, this is like very much a blanket statement, but in general, I think the women in this city are much more impressive than the men, just in like how capable they are, like how they've achieved things in their life. Like women in tech are obviously like at a disadvantage just being women. And so generally they're just like, at least in my experience, the women I've met have been like much more impressive. And so I feel like I've almost fallen back on using that like status, like the company they work for, the role that they're in, as maybe a way to measure if they'll be able to like match my achievement or like what I'm capable of, which is like kind of crazy to actually like verbalize, but it has been this like pattern. It's certainly not a good strategy, I've learned, but it is one that I've kind of like fallen back on. So for example, like there was one guy that I dated for like 5 months, and I kind of like knew that it wasn't going to be a long-term thing because I just didn't think we were intellectually a match. And I think one of the things early on when we started dating was like, he wasn't in like the technical space. Like he worked at a tech company, but he wasn't on the technical side. And I kind of like ignored that, but maybe, I don't know, maybe I should use that as a disqualifier because I just don't think we were intellectually a match. it's one, small sample size, but I do think that like sometimes those things are helpful in just teasing out that like, I don't know, capability or like what if people are, equally ambitious, equally as like intellectually driven, but it does play into this like narrative that your then career defines you, which I also don't necessarily subscribe to. So it's a catch-22.
Do you ever feel like you've dated men and they've almost felt like emasculated because you have like by your potentially your status in your job?
100%. So I actually have a rule. I work in product management and I don't date other product managers. I think it's like a super high ego role to begin with. And so I've been on dates with other PMs where I've actually like gotten into arguments about like business model or other things where it doesn't work. Like they clearly are like threatened by what I have to say. And then it just like escalates and doesn't work.
Maddie, I wanted to jog your memory about, I remember you telling me a story about there was a date where this guy like was telling you you were wrong with your business model or whatever. And I couldn't believe the audacity. If I was on a date to do something like that, I don't know. Yeah. Like this isn't a business meeting where you're like with an adversary or like someone that you're trying to like win an argument with. It's what are you trying to do here? That just kind of blew my mind.
That was, I think, my first date ever in San Francisco. And I like I met this guy on a dating app. We went for drinks and like it was fine. I wasn't like super infatuated by him right off the bat. But yeah, he was another product manager and we got into this like argument over business model, which is again, this is like you talk about the like, I don't know, assumptions around San Francisco. This I feel like just plays into what people think happens here. People always talk about work. But yeah, it was just like kind of crazy escalation where he was like trying to disprove my company's business model. And then like, I don't know, we just went back and forth like sparring.
Oh no.
The worst part of that date too is it turns out he lived a block away from me. And so at the end of the date, we were like, had figured out that we lived super close and he was like, do you want to share an Uber back then? I was like, well,
oh, that's awkward.
I guess. Like, I don't want to. But yeah, it was fun. But it was pretty crazy. And like, I don't think that I've had other dates that were that crazy since then because I don't date PMs anymore. So
I can't imagine that on like a first date, like someone trying to tell you how to do your job.
Yeah, it was bizarre. And like, I mean, it went both ways because I too, I think I'm good at my job. I would say there's like some ego wrapped up around it. There has to be, right? To be, I think, in product management because you end up making a lot of decisions. And so it's not like it was one-sided, right? It was like he was trying to disprove the business model. I was like coming back with, defending the business model or whatever. Just bad all around. Not what you want on a first date for sure.
Yeah, that's a very San Francisco tech date. My God.
So do you try to date people like out of your industries? Like, I guess like Jack, do you avoid tech? Do you date tech? Maddie, are you trying to get away from tech completely? Like, what's the vibe?
I think I will say that there's a trend. I think that I've had more success with men that are outside of tech. So I don't know. Like maybe I should be dating outside of tech more, but also it's like kind of the majority.
For me, I work in PR communications. So, I mean, we support tech companies, but only through the lens of communications and PR. And those are the people like on the other side that I work with. And I mean, when I look at, apps or meet someone out, that's not the first thing that I notice. And maybe it'll come up like, hey, what do you do during the date? But I don't think I would necessarily rule someone out one way or another. I'd say on the whole, from my experience, they've maybe been like me, where they're tech adjacent, or maybe work for a tech company, but they work in a different capacity than like an engineer or a product manager or whatever. It tends to be maybe comms or marketing or finance, and I think that tends to yield a different personality for sure, than someone maybe who's in the thick of in the thick of the tech itself. And Maddie, that's not a subtweet or anything like that. Just
I am offended.
yeah, I've dated people in and out of tech, but it's not something that I've noted, where I've seen some type of overarching trend or cliche, to the point where, of course, as we've already kind of belabored the point about the men here in tech, I haven't seen any sort of equivalent on the other side.
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting how I feel like as we get older and we start to figure out like what we do and don't like in dating, like in many capacities, like I've even started to notice like different, and this isn't everyone, obviously, there's exceptions to every rule, but like different personalities with different, even with different jobs. Like I tend to not really, and I don't do this on purpose either, but I just tend to not date guys in corporate jobs. I always tend to end up dating like musicians or artists or um bartenders. Like I don't know, I feel like it's just like different type of personality or like charisma with people that tend to have those jobs, because you have to have that versus like someone in finance, and also just the hours you work and everything. And again, like I don't think I would like disqualify someone because they did work in finance. It's just kind of like you kind of notice what you're drawn towards or not towards, even in a job, as you get older, which is kind of weird to think about.
We're like the opposite. I feel like I'm only drawn to men that are like either in tech or like some type of engineer or like in finance. And there's no, I don't know if it's just like that, like I don't know, equates to like more ambition or something. And that's like kind of what I want in a partner, or like to match my ambition. But yeah, anyway.
At least Maddie and I know we'll never go for the same guy, apparently.
I know we're perfect going out partners because we won't do that.
I know.
I go for the guy that will bring us to an after party. You go for the guy that looks like he's.
Don't say it.
Never mind.
What do they call it? Like exposure therapy, where they're like, expose yourself to something opposite of what maybe, I don't know if that's the exact definition, but just kind of get over your, I don't know if it's fear or whatever. I think it might be fear.
It's like, it's kind of funny because when I lived in Philly, I like only dated guys in finance. Like again, not on purpose. It just always they were always in finance. I don't know why. And then I moved to LA and was like exposed to all these different types of people I like wasn't exposed to in Philly. So I don't know, maybe the same thing happened to you, Maddie. Like you moved to SF and you're like tech. And I was like, wow, this whole new world of people that fit more my personality. I don't know.
I'm trying to think. So like I had a long-term boyfriend before moving to San Francisco, and he was also in tech. He was actually a product manager.
Never mind.
So like none of my theories, stick. I don't know, maybe it is insanity. But like that one, so Jack actually was the one who called me out on this particular, I don't know, situationship, which is like 5-month-long thing where I knew very early it was not going to work out. And that guy was in tech, but he was in like marketing. And yeah, Jack, I think your exact phrase is like, I think you're doing this more out of convenience. And I was like, oh, cuts deep. But it was right. You were spot on.
Blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then, as they say.
A feral squirrel, maybe.
Yeah.
So I know like SF isn't the hugest nightlife city, or it's becoming. I know you both kind of have different preferences on what you like to do with your time, it sounds like. So how are you meeting people, either with friendships or to date? Like, are you meeting people out at bars when you go out? Are you meeting people through apps? Like, how are you like going on dates?
I am completely off the apps. It's not working for me. And I have been for like most of this year. I just they weren't working out for me. I was like, why do you continue to do this? This is insanity. And so, yeah, I'm not on the apps anymore. I do meet people out, though I haven't met, well, save one person. I haven't met anyone that I like continuously saw. But I was briefly in a relationship this spring with someone that I met out like organically. But I think it's different for Jack, right?
Yeah, it definitely is. Where I wish I was better, as you know, when I mentioned exposure therapy, that's probably something that just came to me from my own experience. Where like, hey, like maybe you should go up and approach people more often. Maybe you should try and strike up conversations more often. And my preferred way was probably be through friends. That hasn't happened thus far. So it's been mostly a mix of maybe 10% approaching someone. And I've wanted to get better at that, or just like striking up a conversation. But the apps have been, in my experience, like really, I don't really have any qualms with it. I think there have been certainly times where it feels like I get it, where if I'm feeling like I might have too many people to respond to, I only could imagine what women are feeling, like probably 10x. Like, oh, I'm talking to a few different people. Well, there's probably 30 guys messaging this girl at the same time. So I get that, like, if you flip it, the experience definitely differs. I've had really good luck. I mean, when I think about the dozens of dates over the years through the apps, it's just, I feel like I've had a good, I wouldn't necessarily call it a system, but just kind of like weeding people out based on a mix of prompts, photos, and the conversations that we have, to like where the point when we actually meet up for a date, that it goes really well. And there's typically a second date, and maybe there's not much more than that, but I'm very rarely left walking away feeling like that was a waste of time, or that, oh, this is a bad person, or just like a really terrible match. Where again, since I've been mostly single for the most part, there obviously hasn't been something that's like stuck for a year or 6 months or more or whatever. But I've typically enjoyed being on the apps. And again, like I said, there's so many diverse, interesting, smart, talented people here, where I feel like I've, kind of been fortunate to kind of reap some of those benefits.
Why do you think you're not clicking with them? Like you're weeding them out through whatever your criteria is. It's seemingly going well on the first date, so why aren't you getting to a third date?
Well, there's been plenty of those too. I think, I mean, let's see. I mean, maybe it's almost like a story time moment where there's been a few of them. I mean, there's been plenty where they've gone to 4 or 5 or 6, and then at that point you can kind of shit or get off the pot, about like being exclusive or not, or you get to know them a little bit more. Like, oh, that was fun, but I don't necessarily. I think there gets to be a point where, say, you make it past the second or third day, and that's happened several times since, in the last year or so, even where it's been 4, 5, 6, 7 dates. But I think it just kind of reaches a certain point where is again like, yeah, is it a matter of convenience and I'm like having fun with this person, versus like, okay, at that 7, 8 date stage, or again, it's different for other people, typically represents a time of maybe a longer term commitment and making that commitment. And at that point, after you've kind of had a little bit of foundation laid and you get to see people in different situations and scenarios and learn more about their background and preferences and whether you're compatible or not, might have led to, I've enjoyed this time together, but I don't necessarily see this going forward. I would say, like, okay, so an example would be someone who I don't typically go for maybe someone who maybe is a little bit more high maintenance. I don't like to use that phrase because I think, it kind of has a bad connotation, but I just
Give us examples, Jack.
yeah. So there was this person that I had enjoyed spending time with, and we'd go on dates and we'd have fun and have a good chit chat and like flirt and have good banter. And there was attraction there, but I think there were some signs for me where I'm like, okay, this is just a little over the top. So
Like what?
there was this one girl who I saw 5 or 6 dates where she came over and it was a school night, it was like a Tuesday night and it was late, and after we had hooked up and it was like 11:30 midnight or something, and she's like, oh, I'm gonna head home now, like, do you want to come back with me? And I'm like, okay, and do what? And she's like, you need to help come take my dog out with me. Like, it's midnight on a Tuesday, and like, do you really need me to come take your dog out with you right now? And I had to politely decline 3 times that actually, like, it's kind of time for me to go to bed. Like, I don't see what the point of that is, other than just to kind of for you to show, like, to exert some sort of control or whatever over me. And she was just very displeased with that, and definitely brought it up another time about how the fact that like I wouldn't go home with her and like walk her dog, and that to me was like kind of take some balls to kind of impress that upon someone so early on, of like, and what expectations are. It just
Didn't you ask specifically too? You were like, oh, am I going to stay at your house? And she was like, no.
That's right. So, well, maybe this was like 3rd or 4th date. I did see this person 6th date.
Okay.
It's worth saying that, yes, I forgot about that part where I was supposed to go over there, take the dog out, and then Uber home. I was like, so I'm spending like not only like this time to like take a dog out at midnight and also spend like $40 to Uber there and back for what? Like, I just didn't get the point of that, especially so early on. And like that kind of was something that, yeah, I'm not necessarily going to cut bait after that, but it's something that signals in my mind of like, maybe, this isn't something that I'm going to continue pursuing in a form of like an exclusive relationship.
But you kept seeing her after that.
We went out, I think maybe 1 or 2 more times, and I think this would be another. Maddie loves this story. She's known as Fluff Girl.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so this is the same person.
Okay.
And it's just like 2 times.
Okay.
Like 2 strikes. So she was spending the night after one of those dates, and we're laying in bed there again, and after hooking up, and she takes a big breath and was like, like, fluff, 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 fluff. And I'm like, okay, what did you just say? Like, really quizzically. And she just said, I like fluff, Jack. And important context here is that earlier in the night, we'd gone on, for drinks, and she talked about how much she likes the quote unquote fluff of relationships, the pomp, the circumstance, being treated like a princess, wined and dined, etc. Which I'm fine with in that setting, and having a conversation about it and getting to know each other a little bit more. But in the bedroom, it felt like a really interesting time and place to say that. And after she did say that, I said something along the lines of, you need to work on your pillow talk, in a playful voice, yet getting a point across. There was a good tone about it. I'll say that.
It was banter, right?
Yeah, I would say as thank you. Yes, it was in a banter type way, but she was still she was just not happy with that. And I think that we did end up only seeing each other maybe once or twice between that and the dog walking incident.
So you really kind of knew on the first date because she was talking about how she's high maintenance. Then she showed you how she was high maintenance during pillow talk. And then you kept going out with her. And she kept showing you she was high maintenance, but
Well,
you don't like high maintenance girls. So I'm really confused why this continued after the first date, to be honest.
well, I'd say like I picked up on it on the first. These were more like dates 3 and 4, but yes, I still.
Okay.
I mean, I at that time, at points in your life, you're just kind of willing to overlook some of that stuff, and maybe there wasn't there. Probably there weren't any other people at the time that I was talking to, or who might have like, you know, I might have given attention to otherwise. So I totally agree with you in the sense that the warning signs or the red flags were there, or just the signs of incompatibility maybe were there. But at the same time, I think I was also just in maybe a moment where I'm like, okay, well, I'm willing to see past that for a little bit longer and have fun. But yeah, to be clear, like didn't really last much longer than that.
So are you looking for a relationship or are you just like riding with it, the wind?
I am. I think the way I've approached it is I don't go into a first or second date putting pressure on, is this person going to be, a girlfriend, or is this person going to be a future spouse? I typically take it 1, 2, 3 dates at a time and see how it progresses a little bit naturally, with the hope that that it go somewhere. I know that I've said, yeah, like over the course of being here, I've been mostly single. I've had one relationship in there, but I don't think it's for necessarily like lack of wanting it. I can think of 2 or 3 people off the top of my head where I was really interested, or we had great dates and I was super excited. And I'd even like, you tell your friends about them, like, oh, I had such a great time with XYZ. Can't wait to get to know them more. But sometimes you're victim to timing, or there's someone else in their life, or there's an ex, or just myriad of circumstances that might get in the way of allowing that to take hold. I would say like over the summer, there was someone that I met through a friend. I was at a house party and we hit it off, and went on we had a great time that night, like not a date, just out with friends, went out on a date, had what I thought was a great time. And I was like super excited about this person, and I was already like chatting with friends about, oh, I met this girl, excited to see where it might go. And then I kind of like got I think we're kind of, we're not a perfect match, or something along those lines, that type of text. So I've been on the receiving end of that too, where, maybe I felt like it could have gone places and it didn't. So
I'm sorry. That's never fun.
no, it's okay. I just kind of chalk it up to, that's just how it is. And this, it's probably been that way for people that I've been dating, and they've done the same, like vice versa. I like to think of it as it's just really hard to line up you could have all the right ingredients for personalities and you click with this person, but if the timing is wrong, like there's been people who like were moving away, or circumstances, like major life circumstances change. Of course it's a bummer, but I tend to I've tried to take it as it comes and understanding that it's very hard for all of the stars to align at once. And then even when you may be in the same place and it's a good match, like is someone emotionally available?
Yeah.
And like, are you both in the same place where like, okay, it feels like a tale as old as time too, where you meet someone and they're fresh off a breakup or something, and
Yeah.
maybe they're not ready to commit, right? Yeah, like I think we all can kind of relate to that.
Well, and the reason I'm asking you all these questions and like maybe giving you a little bit of a hard time is because I feel like there's been times where like there's a guy like similar to you looking for a relationship. They meet a girl and they're like, I kind of like her, but I don't see this going anywhere. And then they keep hanging out with her. And then maybe eventually, you tell her, which I hope you tell her and don't ghost. You seem like a non-ghoster to me, but you tell her, like, I don't think this is going anywhere. But then in their head, they've like, you've been hanging out with them for like however many 5, 6 dates. They think it's going somewhere. It's been convenience for the other person. And this isn't just men. I know women probably do this too. And then like, that's where there's like that whole Maddie, I'm sure you've seen this floating around like, oh, I was dating him, I thought it was going fine, and then he has a girlfriend or she has a boyfriend in 2 weeks. So and then you never know, like, were they looking for something, was I convenient? So there's always like that stereotype. So that's why I was like, what do you want, Jack? Like, what are you looking for?
As an objective party, I will say, Jack, you're very good at communicating. Eventually, like, it's just not gonna work. Like compared to, I mean, men that I've dated where you're like,
Poof.
what is going on here? Or like just ghost. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. And I know because I tell you basically every experience that I've had. I mean, like there's another person that I think about who we went on 5 or 6 dates, and I remember talking to you, Maddie, about okay, well, this I think I'm going to see maybe one more through, and then have a conversation or send a text, because it kind of does get to that point of like, are we, aren't we, and where you feel like there should be some type of communication around that, about like expectations. So you can't also like let the other person's mind run wild of like, what are they thinking? Like, what are like, where do I see this going? Because 5 or 6 dates is a decent amount of time. And like I was saying, even after that first date with that one person who I felt a real strong connection with, I was already kind of looking forward to what's next. So I totally identify with what you were saying about, oh, I thought we were dating, and then they have a boyfriend or girlfriend. So I think it just is, it's hard to have those conversations, but it's necessary. And it's also at the same time, you're like trying to thread a needle, right? Like 1 or 2 dates, like it's still so early. 3 or 4, you get to know each other and sussing it out. 5, 6, you're like, okay, we like each other enough to see each other this long, and presumably like we're prioritizing them over other potential matches or first dates. But you also don't want to come across as like you're kind of being like offering an ultimatum or like backing someone into a corner. And a mature person won't do that. They would approach it in a way of like, I think, I like you. I want to have a conversation about where this might go. But I do think that there just still tends to be some hesitation there. Like when is the right, and it's different for everyone, right? Like when is the right time to kind of broach that?
Yeah, and I think to your point, and I appreciate this from you as well. Like I think sometimes, especially in today's dating society, people are so quick to, at the first sign of something they don't like, brush someone off. Like versus like giving it like a second date or something and being like, oh, maybe that was like, sometimes it could actually be a sign, like the high maintenance situation, like maybe a sign. But like in other situations, it's like, oh, they had this like tick that I didn't really like, but maybe it's something I can get over. Or maybe it was just like a one-time thing because they were nervous. And sometimes people write others off because of one like mistake. And I feel like it's just because we have all this choice now, like with dating apps and things, and you kind of do have to give them a chance. But then, yeah, it gets kind of tricky of like how long.
Yeah, I want to give Maddie a second to offer her perspective too, but I really like that point resonates with me just about like how much time do you give in the sense of like seeing things through versus like you might have seen one or two quote unquote flags and to your point, maybe they just said something funny and you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. And it's like, where is that point where you're no longer giving the benefit of the doubt and like you're kind of seeing them for who they are and how much more do you need to see before it feels like it's unfair to them for their time and maybe, frankly, for your own time. So
Yeah.
it's just tough.
I know, Maddie, I feel like you might have had some experiences with this for sure.
With letting things go on too long, with ignoring red flags. Oh wow. Yeah, that's I don't know. Okay. We can talk about this spring. Yeah, there were a lot of red flags, I would say, in my last relationship. And like, here's the deal is like the world is reopening so far as I'm concerned. Like San Francisco is just reopening. I had like told my closest girlfriend, I was like, yeah, we're like going into this summer. It's going to be our like feral girl summer. We're not like dating anyone. We like agreed we're not dating anyone. And then just like very quickly, I met someone out and I don't know if it was just like lack of dating or like meeting real people in the real world for the previous 2 years because of COVID. But like looking back, I mean, it was 100% just like love bombing. And this particular person like fits every trait for just like narcissistic personality disorder. And like, I thought it was just like fun, irreverent thing. I was like, this person's like a little not what I would typically go for, like a little crazy, but I'm trying to not be serious right now. So like, let's see where this goes. And then that coupled with, I think the fact like COVID, not really like having a lot of successful dating like opportunities during COVID, it quickly turned into this relationship that then very quickly turned like toxic. And I do think like I'll take responsibility for my part. I think there was a lot of like ignoring of red flags on my part and just like very toxic behavior that I definitely overlooked. So yeah, it was an interesting time to be sure, to go through that. I mean, like I think hopefully not everyone has that type of experience dating. But at least like I can, point out those behaviors that are potentially problematic now for friends, though I don't think the experience itself was particularly easy to go through. So yeah, I think like going forward in relationships is just a matter of like that negotiation between like, is this actually a red flag or like, am I just being too picky? Like, where is that balance? I do think, and like Jack, I know you've had a ton of success in the dating apps. I do think like not having not immediately jumping to like, oh, I have like so many other choices available at like swipe of my thumb, is helpful in like maybe identifying what is, negotiable versus non-negotiable in relationships. But I just think your judgment is so clouded in so many ways. It's like, yeah, I'm bored. So I'm like swiping and you're like, don't I have other ways that I could be spending my time?
And you can like get a better feel for people in person too, which I like.
Yeah, I think it's easier maybe to like suss out incompatibility earlier.
Yes, I agree. But if you feel comfortable sharing like some of the narcissistic traits to look out for, I guess.
So unfortunately, having gone through this experience, I spent a lot of time like just trying to rationalize what was happening in my relationship. So unfortunately, I spent a lot of time like researching on the internet. And like typically it's like a cyclical thing, right? So it starts out with like you meet someone and like the narcissist basically like they have this idealized version of themselves. And so when they're looking for a partner, they also like immediately kind of idealize their partner or like potential partner. But then they continuously do that because like people have flaws. And so this idealistic view of the person that they're like pursuing romantically eventually will kind of like the facade cracks and they like realize they're human, and then they like go through some like really problematic behavior, but they're always looking for like, what is that next ideal human? So typically it like starts with like really intense love bombing and just like idealizing the person. So it's like a lot of just like showering with compliments and like, I know that I'm awesome, but like even knowing that, I think this particular person, it was just like above and beyond kind of what I think I was deserving of. Like, just like, it didn't seem genuine, is what I'm trying to say. And then typically, like, after a period of time when they like realize you are human, then they go through this like devaluation phase where it's like, you can do no right. And so I think that was like the most confusing part for me. So, like, some examples of this, like, one morning we were like, I wake up very early and not all of my romantic interests do that. And so I woke up and he was still asleep. And so I was just like reading a book. And when he woke up, he was like, how could you not wake me up? He was like, don't you know how much I like spending time with you? I can't believe you would just like let me sleep through that while you were awake and like read and not wake me up. And I was like, this is like insane behavior. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm sorry I didn't wake you up while you were sleeping to like spend time with me, and I instead chose to like let you sleep and, you know, entertain myself. During this phase, he also said some like crazy shit. Like, he was like, yeah, we shouldn't have kids because our kids, like, they wouldn't get their looks from me and they wouldn't get their brains from you.
What?
Yeah. Yes.
So is he calling himself stupid and you like unattractive?
No, he was calling himself unattractive and me stupid.
Oh, what the fuck?
Which is just like, I was like, okay. And then the other, like, so this man is Italian. And so some of it was like just hard to discern what is cultural versus like what is real problematic behavior. And so we would go out and I legitimately felt like I was just an accessory because he would insist that we would go out. And then the entire time we would be out, he wouldn't speak to me. He would be off talking to other women. And then I'd be like, what the hell? Like, you didn't talk to me the entire night. And he'd be like, well, I'm Italian and I like talking to the ladies. And that was just like,
dude, I hate when the foreign guys, like, I met a French guy once and he was like trying to run around the bar and he was like, I'm French, I am free. And I was like, not if you want to come home with me. Like, screw that.
right. Yeah, it's just like crazy. And all of this is like meant obviously not to make me feel good about myself.
I'm Italian.
And so,
God.
yeah, this went on for like, yeah, I like the ladies. And I was like, I know that they have this reputation, but like, I don't know. There's a line here. And it was just like, especially confusing because I was like, you were the one who wanted to be in a relationship with me. Like, he was the one who pushed it in like that prior stage where he was like, let's date, let's be exclusive. And I was like, I don't know. I like talked about having kind of a fun summer with my friend. This really wasn't what I had planned for myself. And he was like, well, don't you want to date me? Like, and just kept pushing it. And so then to have this like flipped very quickly where it was like, well, we're dating, but you don't really want to spend that much time with me. Or you're like, you're making me feel really bad about who I am. It was just this like very jarring experience. And I will say, like, I'm lucky in that I think I have a lot of like self-confidence to begin with, but I also have people in my life to be like, this is not okay behavior, and like kind of call it out. And like one in particular, she was just like, you're not yourself right now. Like, you've completely changed. You like are normally very energetic. You have no energy. This person has completely drained you. Like, something needs to change here because this is like not healthy for you. And so typically the third stage, if we're going to get scientific, the third stage is like a discarding stage where basically like the person is always looking for the next best thing, and basically they'll keep someone around until they've found someone else. And even while they're looking for other people, they're like degrading the person that they're with. Once they find another person, they basically just like very abruptly cut it off. This particular person, like, we didn't even get there because I had people and kind of like knew that this is not normal behavior, or like acceptable behavior is probably a better word. And so I ended up like ending it because I just didn't want to continue on.
And I feel like, because I know you and I were talking also throughout this whole thing, and you were constantly like you kind of knew, to your point. You're like, I feel like this is just not But it was like one of those like push pull, like I kind of I like him enough, but I don't know. But then you were like backed into a corner, basically.
Yeah, like in the beginning, it was really fun. It was like we have like a lot of the same interests. We like, I don't know, like to go out and like have fun together. But then very quickly it just like all kind of crumbled and became not fun. Like in a matter of like I think a turning point was my birthday where we went to Tahoe for my birthday and I invited him to come on this trip. And it was another example of just like complete gaslighting. I went to pick up our friends at the Reno airport, which is like an hour drive, an hour each way. And I was like, I had asked him, I was like, do you want to come with me to go pick up my friends? And he was like, no, I think I'll stay at the house. And then like the Sunday that we were driving back that weekend, he was like, you ignored me the entire weekend and like just freaked out. So like it all flipped very quickly. And I think part of it was like, again, just like for him, he realized that I wasn't this like completely perfect person because I'm not. And so then his behavior towards me changed really quickly.
Well, I'm glad you got out of that situation. And I hope that that was a one-off and not the norm up there.
I mean, I do think that there's a lot of people that have these like inflated sense of maybe self-worth, or I don't know, like especially in tech, it's like kind of like praised for being like, I don't know, the smartest or whatever. And so it maybe either attracts people that have some of those traits that like have an overinflated sense of importance or something. Cause I don't think I've heard it's not a one-off. For me, it's been a one-off, which is a blessing. But I've heard that there are many other men in this city that act similarly.
I'm sorry. Sorry for you.
Yeah, that's terrible. That's brutal.
Hey, I survived it. I mean, it was, and like the stories now are funny. It was just like, anytime there was like gaslighting, you're like, am I like with you didn't wake me up and I like spending time with you. I was like, should I have woken him up? Like, am I a terrible person for prioritizing me, like reading, like all of that in the moment, you just kind of question it. And that's the intention. That's like how they want you to feel. So
at least now you know the signs. So like if there are a lot of people like that, you will hopefully like pretty quickly be able to be like, I'm out before it gets too deep.
And I think like both myself and I think everyone is now kind of primed to identify those problematic behaviors. So like everyone that I know, family and friends. So it's, yeah, I think hopefully I don't encounter anyone else like that. I hope my friends don't encounter anything else like that, but I think we're well equipped to identify that now. So
I know you've both been through some interesting dating experiences for better or for worse, but what's next? Like, are you like Maddie, are you taking a break and just hanging out? Jack, are you still chilling on the dating apps looking for your special girl? That was kind of cringy, but
no, I'll roll with it. I did meet someone off an app about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we hung out 6-7 times, kind of hitting that threshold period, or that period that I talked about. And I am, I was talking to Maddie the other night, like I'm seeing them tomorrow, and that I am at a point where I'm like ready to have that conversation of, what does this look like? How are you feeling? And just kind of put it out in the open, because that is something that I'm open to doing. And at that point, yeah, like ready to get off the apps, if we come to the same conclusion there. So again, I think it comes back to that I've always kind of been ready to do it. It's more of like, has the timing been right? Has the person, like, have we been on the same wavelength? And I feel like this has been a nice slow burn where it hasn't been necessarily like, again, looking to the next date as in this is a milestone for whether will we or won't we, but just gradually getting to know this person a little bit more. I feel like we're kind of at that inflection point of whether we can, or we're at that inflection point of having that conversation and discussing it further. So I'm I'm looking forward to hearing their thoughts at some point. I am looking for that special girl, as you said. Maybe they'll be it. We'll see.
Honestly, it's been like refreshing hearing that perspective, because you don't get a lot of that down here, at least. Well, it sounds like up there either, but in most places it's hard. Hard for us women.
Sure. Yeah. As you might imagine, coming out of that experience this spring, I definitely just needed to take some time to kind of reevaluate. I still think that I'm there. Like, I don't really feel necessarily super ready to jump into something else. I'm open to it, but I just I'm not really actively kind of pursuing it. Like, didn't get back on the apps. Like, I'm going out and I'm happy to talk to people and I've gone on some dates, but if it happens, awesome. I just think I'm a little bit more discerning now, just having gone through that experience. So we'll see what happens. 2023 is not that far away.
New year, new you. Fresh start.
Yeah. I feel like even so, just having done so many app dates, I think that's a good word, discerning, where you go through whether it's having like a relationship stint like that, or having just done the numbers and going on dates, like you get more discerning as okay, well, can I see this going somewhere with this person, or oh, this to me is a problematic personality trait or characteristic, and thus you feel more confident in maybe cutting it off, or even leaving the date if you're disrespected or whatever. And I feel like having those experiences is super helpful.
Yeah.
You kind of got reframe a negative into a positive where you can. Of course, we'd rather not have that experience than go through it, but it does help in some sense of exposure and resilience, and just kind of getting yourself that experience to be able to be better equipped to handle those situations in the future.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of lowered the stakes too on dating, right? During COVID, I think it was I'm a very social person in general, but a lot of my friends had moved away during COVID. And so it was dating was almost a way that I socialized with people. And so I feel like the stakes were artificially high. And I think that experience, very negative experience dating a narcissist, was helpful, and it completely deflated the importance of dating. And it was just a reminder of I'm good on my own, which I think I knew prior to kind of starting that relationship. And that was what I was looking for this summer, but didn't end up getting. So yeah, it's helpful. There's no negative experience necessarily. It's all learnings.
Yeah, they always say to go on a lot of dates just to figure out what you like and what you don't like. It's just finding the time and energy for it with everything else in our lives.
Totally.
All right. Well, thank you, Jack and Maddie, for joining me. I think everyone learned a lot about San Francisco, the scene, and I think it was awesome to hear both of your different perspectives. I feel like you had very different experiences there, so it was really great talking to you both.
Yeah, Maddie, I hope you have a little bit more of my luck moving forward. And no, I mean that in a very playful way, but also seriously, just been fortunate to not have had even just the one off dates or two dates, where it's just okay, well, that was fine enough interaction, but there's nothing more really there, and just being able to do that in a way that doesn't just kind of suck the life out of you.
Totally. I appreciate that. I
agree.
We'll see.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you both.
Thanks.
Thank you.